Nervous system. What is nervous system? Nervous system is the structure of the nerve, brain and spinal cord. In the nervous system, there are two primary parts, which is the central and peripheral nervous system. What is the function of the nervous system? The nervous system is a brain of its center, coordinate and control all the body activity. When the brain is no longer functioning, the body is no longer able to live on its own. As I mentioned before, in the nervous system, there are two primary parts, which is central and peripheral nervous system. So what is central nervous system and peripheral nervous system? The central nervous system, which is C and S, include the brain and spinal cord. The function of the central nervous system are to receive and process information and to regulate all bodily activity. Second, the peripheral nervous system, P and S, include the 12 pair of cranial nerve extending from the brain and 31 pair of peripheral spinal nerve extending outward from the spinal cord. The function of the PNS is to transmit nerve signal to and from central nervous system. As you can see, this is the picture of the primary part in the nervous system.
Now, I will continue for the next part, which is the nerves. So in the nerves, there are several things that we should know. The definition and also the function of it. So the first one is a nerve. A nerve can be defined as one or more bundles of neurons that connect the brain and spinal cord with other parts of the body. Meanwhile, for the second one is a tract. A tract is a bundle or group of nerve fibers located within the brain or spinal cord. And we have a more better understanding about the tract. There are two types of nerve tracts, which is ascending and also descending. So what are those about? For ascending nerve tracts can be defined as to carry nerve impulses toward the brain. Meanwhile, for descending nerve tracts, it was to have a responsibility in carry the nerve impulses away from the brain. Now, I will continue to the next part, which is a ganglion. Ganglion is a nerve center made up of a cluster of nerve cell bodies outside the central nervous system, or we can say in terms of plural, which is ganglia or ganglions. And for the bold line for this part is that the term ganglion also described as benign tumor-like cyst. Now, for the terms innervation. Innervation can be defined as the supply of nerves to a specific body part. Meanwhile, for a plexus is a network of interesting spinal nerves, or we can say in the term of plural, which is plexus, which this term also described as a network of intersecting blood or lymphatic vessels. Now for the next one is receptors. Receptors are sites in the sensory organs that include eyes, ears, skin, nose and also taste buds that receive external stimulation. For this part, the receptors also can send the stimulus through the sensory neurons to the brain for interpretation. Okay, now after we knowing the nerves part for the neurons, we should know about the reflex. A reflex is an automatic involuntary response to some change either inside or outside the body. As an example, you guys can see through the picture that I have attached in the slide. And we can see for an example of other reflex action, it also can include the first one, changes in the heart rate, respiratory rate and also blood pressure. The second one is coughing and sneezing. The third one is responsible to painful stimuli as shown in the picture for an example. And the last one is deep tendon reflex. Now, after we already know the nerves and also the reflex, we should know the next part, which is the neurons. So what is the neurons all about? Neurons are the basic cells of the nervous systems that allow different parts of the body to communicate with each other. Do you know that the body has billions of neurons that carry nerve impulses throughout the body via an electrochemical process? In the brain, this process creates patterns of neuron electrical activity that also can be known as brain waves. So different types of brainwave are produced during periods of intense activity, rest and sleep. Now, after we know the definition of neuron, we should know the neuron parts. So each neuron consists of a cell body where several dendrites, a single axon and terminal end fibers included in them. So the first one, the dendrites. The dendrites are the root-like processes that receive impulses and also can conduct them to the cell body. In this process, it was a process where it was to a structure that extends out from the cell body. The second one, the axon. The axon is a process that conducts impulses away from the nerve cell. An axon can be more than 3 feet long. Many but not all axons are protected by a myelin sheath, which is a white fatty tissue covering. The next one is terminal end fibers. So terminal end fibers, what is all about? Terminal end fibers are the branching fibers at the end of the axon that lead to the nerve impulses from the axon to the synapse. So when we talk about synapse, what is a synapse about? A synapse is the space between two neurons or between a neuron and a receptor organ. A single neuron can have several or few hundred synapses. Okay, then now we will move to the next subtopic, which is neurotransmitters. So what is neurotransmitters about? Neurotransmitters are chemical substances that can make it possible for messages to cross from the synapse of a neuron to the target receptor. There are between 200 and 300 known neurotransmitters, and each has a specialized function. Here are some examples of neurotransmitters and their roles that you can have to look and know about. The first one is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is released at some synapses in the spinal cord and at neuromuscular junctions. It also can help in influence muscle action. The second one is dopamine. Dopamine is released within the brain and plays a role in motivation, pleasure, and muscle movement. It also can excess of dopamine will help in associated with schizophrenia, mood and thought disorder, and abnormal movement disorders such as Parkinson's and disease. Now for endorphin. Endorphin are naturally occurring substances that are produced by the brain to help us relieve pain. Now for the next example of neurotransmitter is norepinephrine. Norepinephrine affects alertness and arousal. It also increasing blood pressure and heart rate, and also releasing stores of glucose in response to stress. It is also a hormone released by the adrenal gland as part of the body's fight or flight response. The next one or the last one is serotonin, which is released in the brain, and it also has roles in sleep, hunger, and pleasure recognition. It is also sometimes linked to mood disorders.
Next is glial cell. Glial cell provides support and protection for neurons, and the four main functions are to surround neurons and hold them in place, supply nutrient and oxygen to neurons, to insulate one neuron from another, and to destroy and remove dead neurons. Next is myelin sheath. A myelin sheath is the protective covering made up of glial cell. These white sheets form the white matter of brain and cover some parts of the spinal cord and the axon of most peripheral nerve. The portion of the nerve fiber that are myelinated are known as white matter. The term myelinated means having a myelin sheath. It is the color of this covering that makes this fiber white. The portion of the nerve fiber that are unmyelinated are known as gray matter. The term unmyelinated means lacking of myelin sheath. The legs of the myelin sheath reveal the brownish-gray color of the cortex of the cerebrum and cerebellum and the core of the spinal cord. Next is the central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. These structures are protected externally by the bone of the cranium and vertebrae of the spinal column. From the picture, we can see within this bony structure, the brain and spinal cords are further protected by meninges and the cerebrospinal fluid. Next is the meninges. The meninges are the system of membrane that enclose the brain and spinal cord. The meninges consist of three layers of connective tissue. These are the dura mater, arachnoid membrane, and the pia mater. For the dura mater is the thick, tough, and outermost membrane of the meninges. The inner surface of the cranium is lined with the dura mater. The inner surface of the vertebral column is known as the epidural space. This space, which is located between the wall of the vertebral column and the dura mater of the meninges, contains fat and supportive connective tissue to cushion the dura mater. In both the skull and vertebral column, the subdural space is located between the dura mater and the arachnoid membrane. Next is arachnoid membrane. The arachnoid membrane, which resembles a spider web, is the second layer of the meninges and is located between the dura mater and the pia mater. Arachnoid means having to do with spider. The arachnoid membrane is loosely attached to the other meninges to allow space for fluids to flow between the layers. The subarachnoid space, which is located below the arachnoid membrane and above the pia mater, contains cerebrospinal fluid. And the last layer of meninges is the pia mater. Pia mater is located nearest to the brain and spinal cord. It consists of delicate connective tissue that contain a rich supply of blood vessels. And the next one is cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid, also known as spinal fluid, is produced by special capillaries within the foreventricle located in the middle region of the cerebrum. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear, colorless, watery fluid that flows throughout the brain and around the spinal cord. The function of these fluids are to cool and cushion this organ from shock and injury, nourish the brains and spinal cord by transporting nutrient and chemical messenger to these tissues.
I will continue the presentation by explaining the power of the brain. Without wasting our time, my friends and I will explain all the power of the brain. The cerebrum is a major part of the brain. It contains two hemispheres and each has four major lobes. The brainstem, on the other hand, is the bottom portion of the brain. It is below to the cerebrum and connects to the spinal cord. Cerebrum is the largest and uppermost portion of the brain, consisting of four lobes. It is responsible for, though including judgment, memory, association, and critical thinking, processes sensations, and controls all voluntary muscle activity. The cerebral cortex is the outer layer that lies on the top of the cerebrum, which is made up of gray matter and also made up of elevated folds and deep fissures. The cerebrum is divided to create two cerebral hemispheres connected at the lower midpoint by the corpus callosum. The right cerebral hemisphere controls the majority of functions on the left side of the body. An injury to the right hemisphere produces sensory and motor deficits on the left side of the body. On the other hand, the left cerebral hemisphere controls most functions on the right side of the body. An injury to the left hemisphere produces sensory and motor deficits on the right side of the body. Each hemisphere is subdivided to create pairs of the cerebral lobes. Each lobe is named for the bones of the cranium that cover it. The frontal lobes control skilled motor functions, memory, and behavior. The parietal lobes, on the other hand, receives and interprets nerve impulses from the sensory receptors in the tongue, skin, and muscles. Next, the occipital lobes, which is control the eyesight. The temporal lobe controls the senses of hearing and smell, and the ability to create, store, and access new information. Moving on to the thalamus, which is located below the cerebrum. Thalamus produces sensations by relaying impulses to and from the cerebrum and the sense organ of the body. Okay, I will stop here and pass to my companions to continue the explanation.
Hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is located below the thalamus. Hypothalamus is functioning to regulate and integrate the nervous system, including to controlling the heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and digestive tract activity. It is also regulate the emotional response, including the fear and pleasure, body temperature, food intake, water intake, and sleep cycle. And last one is the pituitary gland and endocrine system activity. Cerebellum. Cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. It's located at the back of the head below the posterior portion of the cerebrum. The function of the cerebellum is to receive incoming message regarding the movement between the joint, muscle tone, and the position. The message are relayed to the different part of the brain that control the motion of the skeleton muscle. And it's a general function to produce the coordinated movement, maintain the equilibrium, and sustain the normal position by the cerebellum. Brainstem. Brainstems are like a portion of the brain that connect the cerebral hemisphere with the spinal cord. There are three parts in the brainstem, which is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Midbrain is the functioning to processing visual and auditory information and regulating muscle movement and motor control. Second, pons. The function of the pons is to regulate the signal that give you the sensation of the pain from anywhere in your body below your neck. The last one is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is the bottommost part of the brain and it helps control the vital processes like your heartbeat, breathing, and blood pressure. Spinal cord. As you can see in the picture, the spinal cord is like a tube-like structure that begins at the end of the brainstem and continue down to almost the bottom of the spinal cord. It's surrounded by the cerebrospinal fluid and meninges, and it is a pathway for impulse to and from the brain.
The peripheral system consists of 12 pairs of cranial nerve that extend from the brain and 31 pairs of spinal nerve that extend from the spinal cord. So the word peripheral means pertaining to the body parts that are away from the center of the body. There are three types of specialized peripheral nerve, and its job is to transmit signal and to inform the central nervous system. Which is the first one is autonomic nerve fibers, where the autonomic nerve fibers carries instruction to the organs and glands.
The second one is sensory nerve fibers, where it receives external stimuli, like how something feels when touched, and delivers the information to the brain to be interpreted. And the third one is somatic nerve fibers, or motor nerve fibers. It controls the body's voluntary muscular movement by conveying information from the motor nerve fibers. Now, as for the cranial nerve, it came from the undersurface of the brain. All pairs of nerve carry the same function and structure. And as you can see in the diagram, these cranial nerves are identified by Roman numerals for the area or function that they serve. The peripheral nerve has 31 pairs that are grouped together and named based on the area of the body that they innervate. Sometimes, spinal nerve also join with others to form a plexus to innervate a certain area. Do refer to the picture that will be displayed after this. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two parts, which are sympathetic nerve and parasympathetic nerve. This system also controls the involuntary action of the body, such as the functioning of the internal organs. And as for homeostasis, it means the process of maintaining the constant internal environment of the body, where it balances the activity of the other divisions. As for the sympathetic nerve, it makes the body prepare for emergency and stress by increasing respiratory rate, heart rate, and blood flow to muscle. This nerve is awakened as it is part of the body's natural reaction toward real or imaginary danger. Meanwhile, the parasympathetic nerve will make the body return to normal after a response to stress. They will also maintain normal body function during ordinary circumstances that are not emotionally or physically stressful.